if you want to just give a running commentary, I'm happy for you to do that.
Yeah, so this is a Lazutino hive, or a horizontal deep box hive, which is following or adapted from the design by Philu Chandleriu. These bees came in earlier this spring. So you can see it's got a hessian top cloth, it's got propolis where they've been propolising that to it. Earlier, it's got some follow boards at either end. Earlier on in the season, I was feeding them to help them get established because there's no foundation in here. So these are the frames that we make ourselves, or I should say, I make myself.
So this is a very deep frame, and which has got wires across it to reinforce the comb. Yeah,
and it's got some sort of spacers on it as well. So these are, designed for normal national or Dedan frames, but if you're making them yourself, but you can make them longer. And then it's got a guide bar inserted in here, so I've just routed out a groove and then inserted a strip of a very narrow strip wood, just to encourage them to.
So you don't even use a strip of foundation?
No, okay. No, I think it's more secure. My thinking is it's more secure just to use some wood for them to build it onto, and they do seem to take the cue. So this is one just started there, but just a little bit of
the usual little heart shape.
Yeah. Okay. And then you can see, I don't know if you can get that shot there with the different, yes, you can see the combs kind of coming down. It's so beautiful seeing them kind of build this succession of comb. So this is, they haven't really filled this yet. This one they've begun to fill out a little bit. This one, also you can see what it looks like when they start filling it out properly. I don't think there's any. So there's the stores that they've started laying down. And then this is what it looks like when you install them, when you convert the frames. When you buy them in as a national package.
Oh, I see. So these are really extended nationals.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I bought them in from a black bee breeder, and that's how they've been extended. You can see some brood down there.
So they're double height, or more than double height?
Yes.
Of the national hive.
Yeah. So the idea is that the stores are going to be in the outer frames, and the brood nest will not really need to be disturbed too much. So there's another follower board. We've still got some space to expand into.
So what advantages would you say this hive has over, well, A standard national, and B, a top bar hive?
Well, I think you can see here, that is the depth of the wall.
Right, so
that is
thick,
very, very thick.
That's about 75 mil, something like that altogether?
Yeah.
Is that all solid wood, or is there an air gap in there?
No, so there's cedar cladding, which you can see the depth of there, and then there's it's got wool insulation inside.
Okay.
And then it's clad. So this one actually is one of the earlier designs that is clad in pine cladding. So you can just about see that there. So it's got another layer of cladding.
Okay.
But later on, I did actually move to ply. But you can do, you can clad the inside with pine or ply. You can kind of see there cladding. But the idea is for it to be a very very warm, not just warm but thermally stable hive.
Yes.
So that both the humidity and the temperature. I'm just going to put that over for a minute while I'm talking. Both the humidity and the temperature is much more stable, and that they are able to control that much better, and that has health benefits for impairing varroa reproduction, and also in the winter there's going to be a lot less risk of condensation and dripping, and also they're going to, in theory, and this is what we're kind of looking for, is they should be able to more effectively evaporate and can sort of ripen honey, because because they'll be able to kind of condense it more effectively. So
it's in a phrase, it's so that they can take control of their internal environment.
Yes,
I guess.
basically. And I'm hoping that it will allow them to be mobile for a bit longer into the winter, and not necessarily. I think we have this idea that shut the microphone, sorry.
Sure.
We have this idea that actually bees cluster and they just stay all together all winter, and that's exactly how it should be. But there is research around that suggests that that's not the case. That they do in a sort of much warmer tree interior, they would be a lot more mobile for a lot longer. And I think that's the point about the thermal stability, is it takes a lot longer, hopefully, for that temperature to drop to the point where they want to cluster and not be mobile. And then it also takes a lot longer for them to come out of that, so that they're safer for longer. And they don't kind of come out of it too soon and then become too active too quickly. So these are, these are still in part ideas, but this is based on on research that they're doing on comparing hive types and to tree cavities and their kind of thermal properties. So yeah, trying to recreate those natural environments.
There is a school of thought that says that it's actually good for bees to get cold in the winter, or should I say, it's good for the temperature to drop below that where the queen will continue to be laying eggs.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I think this is what I need to see how these work in practice. But definitely, the kind of literature seems to imply that hives, in order to emulate a tree cavity, that hives would be a lot more insulated than they are conventionally.
Sure, yeah.
So how that affects behaviour in practice in this particular bit of the country, that's still to see, and that's something that I'm keen to monitor and kind of see in practice how that bears out in terms of the health of them. Yeah.
I can imagine this type of hive doing very well in, I don't know, somewhere like Canada or Alaska, particularly, where insulation is really important.
Well, this hive is a Russian, he was using this in Russia, and I think that, that speaks of the fact that actually it's well suited to overwintering bees, and he was convinced that they did very well as a result. So, I'm keen to see how it does in this weather.
Indeed. It'll be interesting to see how it works out in terms of varroa, because, of course, if you have a hive that keeps the bees sufficiently warm for the queen not to go out of lay, then you're providing a home for mites to reproduce constantly.
That is true, but I do also want to get some temperature. It's my plan to get some temperature monitors in here, because it is also the case that higher, as I understand it, that higher temperatures and higher humidity inhibits varroa reproduction.
Absolutely,
and also CO2 levels in part as well kind of play into it seems. So if they are more able to control the environment of the hive, and it is easier for them year round to maintain slightly, a warmer nest than is it's more energetically efficiently, then I think, my hope is that will, over the whole year, impair varroa reproduction. But it's difficult to know. And as you say, having a break in the brood, is good for varroa. So.
Sure. This, of course, plays into the theory of the varroa hive as well, which works similarly on the principle of having a effectively sealed space for the bees, and the with insulation above, so that they can again take control of their temperature. And this hive is like it's a warray on its side with a good deal more space in it. But it will be very interesting to see how this works out over time.
And
especially with the black bees.
And I think I said, with the frames being so deep, they can migrate up and down the frames over the course of the winter to help moderate the temperature, and there's no queen excluder in there, so they're free to do that at their will. And it will be very interesting to see over the years, because that's really the only way that you really know, is kind of over time.
So these hives also have a version of the ecofloor, or the living floor, as Emily calls it. They're stood on a layer of four bricks high footing. And tell us about what's inside there, Emily.
So before the hives were put on the bases, they were filled with rotting wood and dead wood and leaf litter collected from around the farm in the woodland areas, to try and bring in some of the ecosystem that would naturally occur at the bottom of a tree. And opinion seems to be, divided on this to some extent as to how beneficial this is for bees or not, because trials with introducing generalist mites from leaf litter have not been that successful, but then there's also other interesting evidence coming out from people like Paul Stanets at Fungi, I can't remember the name, but Paul Stanets, saying that bees benefit from being in close contact with fungi. And so I think I'm very interested in this idea of trying to create a ecosystem in the hive, and seeing what the benefits of that are. Perhaps there are mutually beneficial interactions with other life, and be that fungi, kind of the microfauna, or humidity buffers. So let's see how that goes. And it's definitely not going to do them any harm.
Sure. Well, we assume not, because in hollow trees, of course, bees are exposed to all manner of other creatures, and every hive I open, certainly, and almost certainly yours too, there'll be things like earwigs and woodlice as very visible proof of that.
Yeah, definitely.
But also things like the Stratiolelaps mite, which is the one I think you were talking about, as being deliberately introduced. But there's all manner of little creatures. I've heard as many as 1,700 different species in a hollow tree.
Yeah.
So clearly bees have learned to adapt and work alongside, and possibly in many cases with some of those other species.
Exactly. And so I have been trying to make notes of what I see in the hives, because, as you say, you definitely see things other than honeybees in the hives, and so it's just interesting to sort of note that and any observations that come with that, and I am quite keen to do some microscope work later on and see.
That's something I haven't got around to yet with my ecofloors, is doing actually